On this
Morning.
beautiful and snowy day in Savannah, Georgia.
I
I don't
tell
know if
you,
all of you,
it's a winter wonderland here
it
in
is a
Twin
winter
City.
wonderland. We just went and had a great time because we went and um, went sledding and did snowballing and went to the park, and we had a great time. So welcome to everybody who is
Hold it,
joining us.
Rabbi. It's
And my daughter got a little overexcited.
Rabbi.
She's
She's
coming
saying
now.
that she doesn't didn't get your email.
All right, let me go check again. I'll send it to her. One
Rabbi,
second. Trying to get okay. I'm gonna resend it to her again.
He's going to send it to you again now.
I'm gonna send it to just okay.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Stuart's joining us.
All right. All right, would you tell Flossie? I just sent it to her again. So hopefully this will work. Hope you guys are staying safe. My kids had never seen snow before. So this was great. So welcome to everybody who's watching on YouTube. We know we have a bunch of people out there to watch. I hope you are safe and sound, enjoying the snow. Welcome to everybody's here, including Arlene and Ron and David and Lou and Bubba, Karen and Jeff, and hopefully Flossie very soon.
Yeah.
We're gonna wait a second to start as I know Flossie is trying to get on. You do see my office because I'm on both my office one and this because I don't have my passwords. I do, but I to get onto YouTube, so I just made it easier to go onto there. And excited because it is beautifully white. Is the same in Sun City, I guess? White everywhere. David, how about where you are?
Well, I'm in Savannah. I was looking forward to warmer weather here.
Yes.
But I do like the snow. I grew up in Michigan, and I
Oh, so
prefer a nice white snow and now a blue sky compared with, the dreary weather of the UK.
right.
So it's
Well,
nice.
it is beautiful. We stayed out about 15 minutes too long for my daughter. She kind of got a little tired of it, but because they were wearing rain boots, we didn't realize that their legs and their feet were completely soaked.
I remember that from childhood. Yeah.
Yes. But my son and daughter have seen snow now at 5 and 7, and the first time I really saw snow was when I was 26. So, so they are way ahead of me, and it was in Cincinnati as I was applying for rabbinical school. All right, let's see. Flossie's still not on. Let me see if I call her and see if I can get her. Sorry about this, guys. Let me give her one more second, give her another call, see if I can get her on.
Hi, Lou.
Hey, Flossie. Did you press the button to get? I emailed you. I just emailed you again. Okay, go back to the link and double click it again. Left double click it. I wish I was capable. And then press join meeting.
Just meeting?
Yeah, so the link I sent you, excuse me, should just say, there should be, it says, let's see what it says exactly at the bottom. It says Zoom meeting, just press on that twice and that should get you in. Where it says https://us02web. Do you see that?
Clicking join.
Don't click join, click the link.
Flossie,
Okay, didn't we?
Flossie,
Maybe click.
put your boots on and come over here.
For a minute and then I'm gone. the class, I'll just hear you.
Well, once you click on once, try clicking on once or going onto YouTube. Try clicking on the YouTube one. You'll be able to watch even though we can't hear you. So if you, let's make sure.
I don't know why it's not going.
Well, when you go, you may see a thing that says launch meeting, then click launch meeting if that does that first.
Don't worry. Teach the class and I'll just listen.
Okay, well, try going on to there's another link to YouTube. Press that one, see if that one works. All right, sorry for late, guys, but technology can be a
Oh,
gift
yeah.
as it is, but it also can be a little difficult at times, and I may have sent it to her incorrectly.
No problem.
No, you didn't. We have to get her to computer class. Right, Flossie? I don't know if she's still on the phone.
I know if somebody can teach computers. Yeah, Carolyn Zalesny does it. She's in the landing.
I could teach her. I keep telling her I'm going to take her to buy a. She doesn't have any device other than.
Okay, I'll leave you on my phone then. How's that? Is that okay?
I'm sorry I didn't hear you.
I'll leave you on the phone. Can you hear from the phone? Something, did we have an earthquake? My house just shook. Did you guys feel a shake too?
No.
No.
Okay. All right.
Rabbi,
car.
did you lose your heat in the house?
No, we did not.
Oh, because you look like you can go skiing in that outfit.
Well, we just came from the park from throwing snowballs and going sledding.
Ah.
So that is why. My kids.
Interfering with people getting on.
Rabbi, can you look? And Stuart's trying to get on, and he knows what he's doing. So maybe he's waiting, and you have to let him in.
Oh,
No,
that
he's-
may be it as well.
No, he knows what he's doing. Trust me.
No, I know, but did I not let him in? Let me
I guess
see.
not.
All right, because I'm on two things, so I didn't see it. So that may have been
Oh,
it for
sorry.
her too. Okay,
I can just bring him in. I'll have him come in here.
let's see here. Let me go to them. I'm on two Zooms. Wait, it's not letting me get to the other one. There we go. All right. There we go. Now,
I'll tell him to come in here.
there you go. Oh, Flossie, I'm letting you in now. Sorry, I was on the wrong.
Yay.
Flossie, you should be coming in now. Can you see it? Flossie, I let you in.
She's on mute.
But she's on now?
She's on mute.
All right. All right. Flossie, you're on now.
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to take you off the phone. You're on. That's my fault. All right, guys. Fantastic. Welcome, everyone. We are going to take some time to talk a little bit again about the Bible and the different books, what the meaning is, what it's done for us, and so forth. And if you have any questions, please let me know, because we'll start talking a little bit about what we did last week. We'll kind of do a little bit of review, and then we will go into it. So any thoughts or questions from what we did last week, first of all? Okay. So I'm going to put up this on. This is what we did last time. Come on, there we go. So last time we talked about the Bible itself and the different books. And so I'm on two different ones. Okay. Now, this again is the Bible. The Bible is made up of three sections: Torah, Nevi'im, and Ketuvim. Torah, prophets, and writings. The Tanakh is how you say it, but it is not an actual word. Tanakh is just an acronym. Sometimes it's called Tanakh, with a K at the end, because Ketuvim starts with a K, but often when you put the K at the end, it becomes a Cha. So Tanakh is what we usually say. So the first section is, of course, the Torah, the most important. The next section is Nevi'im, from Genesis all the way to Kings 2. It's a linear history going from the creation of the world to the destruction of the Second Temple. These next three here, Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel, are the major prophets because their books are longer. They're in chronological order also, they overlap with each other, and they do overlap with Kings 1 and Kings 2. The next 12 are the 12 minor prophets, and they are chronological order. So Malachi is the last prophet that we know of. And sometimes the minor prophets overlap with the major prophets and overlap with kings as well. So the minor prophets can be very short. As I mentioned, Obadiah has one chapter. Some of them are very famous. The most famous, of course, is Jonah, because obviously we read on Yom Kippur, and it's a very interesting story. And some of them are not as well known, but all of them are essential. Ketuvim is separated into different parts. The first part is what we might call wisdom literature, Psalms, Proverbs, and Job. Then we have a section of Megillot. These are the 5 books that are connected to holidays. Most famously, Esther is connected to Purim, which is coming up. It's the only book in which a holiday is completely based on the book. And the third section are just what are added. It's Daniel, which is, he's not really a prophet. He's not a king. He's kind of like Samuel a little bit. He's kind of in between. And then Ezra and Nehemiah, which is a telling of Ezra and Nehemiah coming in the 5th century to reestablish Judaism in Israel. And then Chronicles 1 and 2, which are a retelling of David's story, taking out a lot of the bad parts that make David look bad. So that's the Bible. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about the different books and the implications of all of them. Now, what I believe is that, and is my thing look clunky when it's going on since I'm doing on 2 different ones, or does it look okay?
You're fine.
Okay.
It's okay.
Okay. So we all know what it's coming out clunky on mine because I'm doing 2 things. The most important books are obvious. These are the 5 books of Moses. We'll probably go over that a little bit more. In the 5 books of Moses, obviously Genesis is the prequel, kind of like The Hobbit to Lord of the Rings. Exodus is probably the most important book because it is the birth of Moses and the Exodus. Genesis concludes with the death of Joseph. Exodus chapter 2 is the birth of Moses. And the end of Deuteronomy, the very end of Deuteronomy, is the death of Moses and Joshua taking over. It goes directly into Joshua. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about theology today. And what is essential for us to understand about the Bible is that it in some ways predates philosophy and theology as we know it. It's so old that it is basically a little different because Judaism is basically created, and as we go along, we kind of create our philosophy. And do I look clunky to you guys? I feel like I'm looking clunky. I can fix that. No, not too?
Fine. You're fine.
Okay, so in the Torah, the philosophy is very basic in some ways compared to what we do today. So it's brilliant. They give us one God. We talked about this. That's not a big deal, really. What's a big deal is that it's an ethical God that expects us to behave as good human beings, 1. 2, this is a God that cares for human beings, did not create us as slaves. 3, this is a God that is organized, created the world in an organized fashion, day 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, very organized, where all the other creation stories are about chaos. This is a God that expects us to act ethical and does not misbehave in a way that the other ancient gods did. Ceaselessly murder, uh, coveting everything, sleeping with human beings and having godlike children, being very seditious, capricious. This is not that type of God. This is a God that created everything and is a God for everybody, even our enemies, which is really new. This God created our enemies just like this God created us. It is a fantastic, and it's all predicated, though, on this new idea of ethics. And ethics is new in some ways, but not new in others. Let me explain. You probably heard of the Ten Commandments. I don't know if you heard about it. It was a big deal. It got a lot of press a few years ago. I think the internet was abuzz with it. It was on TikTok before they canceled TikTok and then brought TikTok back. And so the Ten Commandments have some essential ethical ideas. Don't murder, don't steal, be good to your parents, don't lie. So these are really important basics when it comes to ethics. The most basic thing: don't steal people's stuff, don't lie, especially in court, and don't murder. However, we did not originate these ideas. Ron, you had a question.
Yeah, that seems to, you said that God created our enemies, but he also came up with what you just said about the Ten Commandments. The thing is, that contradicts each other. Why would he create our enemies?
That is an excellent point. One, God did not create our enemies. God created humanity, and then we made people our enemies. So it's not that God created somebody to be my enemy. It's like human beings are fallible. And in a very basic sense, if you don't give choice, then you can't be good. I mean, obviously, if you have only one choice to do exactly what your mommy and daddy says, to pay taxes, and there's no alternative choice, you're not being good, you're a robot. You're doing what you're programmed to do. So God did these, and then but these new ideas of murder and theft are not new. If you read Hammurabi's Code from the 19th, 18th century BCE, they have these laws in there. Murder, theft, lying, these are not new laws, but they are new for one reason. Because in the Ten Commandments adds God. The first three commandments are about God. Believe in God, don't insult God, don't pray to idols. And this is the best way I can explain. I think I've done it before. If we all are living in an ancient world and we're living in our tribes, and Karen is starting like a city, like she's starting empire building. So Karen wants us to live in her city. If Karen doesn't have a few rules, we're not moving there. If the laws Karen's city are not don't murder, don't steal, you have to have a judicial system, a court system. If you don't have that, I'm not moving to Karen's city, because I'm not moving to some place where it's legal to murder me. I'm not moving to some place where people can steal my stuff because I love my stuff. Check out George Carlin. So the laws of don't murder, don't steal, don't lie in court are not ethical. They're practical. You can't have a city where people move there without these laws. That's why they have the laws. But the laws we have in the Ten Commandments are saying don't murder, don't steal, don't lie, because they are inherently wrong. It has nothing to do about us living together. They are inherently wrong. And that is a very big step. That's the biggest step of all. The idea of God expects some sort of ethical code that we will follow. That is unique. That is Judaism's original idea. Now, along with this comes the beginning of theology, which is if you behave, you are going to be rewarded. And if you misbehave, you are going to not be rewarded, or maybe even punished. It's a very simple idea. Stuart, did you have a question?
No,
So
just
it's a very simple
formulating
idea. So,
them.
so the problem with this idea is, after a time, it does not work. It's pretty obvious. And they struggle with this idea for hundreds and hundreds of years, because they're sometimes believing God, sometimes they leave. But eventually, I'm going to look at Stuart and say, Stuart is a really terrible person. He's the worst person I know. And yet, he has a beautiful wife. He's wealthy. He's beloved by so many people. His kids love him, but he's just a terrible person. He cheats on his taxes. He's a mafia boss. But yet, why is he so successful? And I might say to myself, well, he's probably miserable on the inside, because that's what God says. But then I look at Stuart, and you know what? He does not look miserable in his mansion. He looks pretty happy. So this is a problem. This is a serious problem. How big of a problem is this? This is such a big problem that it could end Judaism, very simply. If you don't evolve theologically, you're going to die out, because nobody wants to live in a religion where no matter what you do, it doesn't matter. And this all comes to a head in one book. So we put something in the chat. Let me check what it says. Elton John wrote a song about Daniel feeling the pain. Yes. Is the song about Daniel? Is that about the book of Daniel? Huh. I didn't know that. All right. Who knew that? So there's one book that changes the game, that kind of begins the new stage of theology. It's the book of Job. So all this time with the prophets, by the way, their whole job of the prophet is one job. The job of the prophet is say, behave. That's all the prophet does. The prophet's an outsider who just goes to everybody and says, behave. If you're behaving well and you're doing everything you're supposed to, the prophet's not coming to your house probably. And so when you get to Job, you have a very strange story about somebody who may or may not be Jewish, but who God loves. This is God's. Now, this story is not meant to be a literal story, by the way. Very similar to Esther. Now, Esther is a farce. Job is not a farce. Job is first theological evolutionary step in Judaism in many ways, after the original. So I think all of us know the story basically about Job. Job is somebody God really likes. This is my man. He is caring. He is kind. He treats everybody with respect. He pays his taxes. He is Stuart. This Job is Stuart. Stuart, except for the bad things aren't going to happen to you, Stuart. But Job is this awesome guy, and God is bragging about Job to Satan, who is God's prosecuting attorney. So if you've ever seen Law and Order, you got the guy in the office, the old Jewish guy, who is the crusty Jewish guy and then you got the guy who goes into court and does the prosecuting for him. And so he is God's prosecutor. And he comes to God. His job is to come up with alternatives. You go after you die, you go before God and you try and explain how good you were. And Satan is there saying, yeah, you did do that, but you also did this, and you did this, and you did this. Explain yourself. So Satan goes to God and says, of course, Job is awesome. He's rich. He's healthy. He's got a wonderful family. He's respected by the community. Who would not believe in God if you have all of these things? So God says, all right, you can do what you want to Job, just don't hurt him. So Satan kills his wife and his family. He makes them poor. And Job is still saying to God, what did I do, God? I don't understand. And God is like, look, see, he still believes in me. And Satan says, well, I haven't injured him. He's still healthy. God says, okay, don't kill it. So he makes Job unhealthy. So now you have this man who was the top of the top, most respected, and now he is lost everything and he's unhealthy and he's miserable. And throughout the book, you have his friends who keep coming to him and telling him, just admit what you did wrong. God forgives. And every time he goes, these people who are friends keep tell him, I knew you were doing something wrong. You were too perfect. You were obviously doing something behind the scenes, probably some sort of pyramid scheme or something. And he keeps telling him, no, I didn't do anything wrong. So he believes in God. He never loses his belief in God, but he never acquiesces to people telling him he did something terribly wrong. He must deserve this. And so at the end of the book, Job says, God, I did nothing wrong. I dare you to come down here and tell me what I did wrong. So, of course, this is a story. So, who comes down to talk to Job? God. God actually comes down to talk to Job. And Job says, God, what did I do wrong? And this is where it's a really good literary device. As readers, we know what happened to Job. We've been reading the story. We know that God had a bet with Satan. But when Job goes up to God and says, I didn't do anything wrong, please tell me what I did wrong, what's the answer God gives? God doesn't say, I had a bet with Satan. God says the answer, and this is the answer to all answers. What's the answer? Were you there when I created the world? That's the answer. The answer is, I'm God and you're not, and you can't understand me. And that's the answer. And that is an evolutionary step, because now we're saying, guess what? Maybe we don't all have it figured out. Maybe there's more to it. Maybe we have to start thinking. And if you look at these down here, you'll see that there is a book called Proverbs. And Proverbs is the opposite of Job. Proverbs is the straight man. He's the straight and narrow. You work hard, you pay your taxes, you're nice to people, and you're going to be fine. Everything's going to be perfect. Proverbs is the old theology. Be good and you're going to be rewarded. Job is the new theology. We can't understand anything. They're kind of polar opposites, and they work together to try and send us down a new road. And that new road is going to come a lot more after the Bible than during the Bible. The new road is bad things happen to good people. Why? So that's why we have Job as such an interesting book, because it is one of the books that keeps the Bible viable. It is the one that is open-ended, that says you got to go out there and figure out theology for yourself. And what happens eventually? What is the new theology that comes? It's an addendum. Eventually, we're going to say, yes, we believe God rewards us, except what? What's the addendum? What's the evolution? God rewards us after we die. And you cannot prove it or disprove it while you're here. So it's brilliant. It says if you do good here, you're going to go to a good place in the next world. Whereas back then, people just thought you went underground when you died. So this is why Job is so essential to the Bible. Proverbs keeps us on the straight and narrow. You need to behave. Job is the one that says, wait a minute, we need to question and see what's really going on. It also teaches us a combination that even when things are going badly and we think we're cursed, we are not. We don't understand God, and we need to do our best even in this world. So that is what we have theologically. But when you look at the books, we also have some very interesting choices. So, any questions before I continue? Stuart.
Yeah, there is, I think, a more cynical view of the progression that you just went through.
Absolutely.
In very brief, I hope. One, people gravitated to cities, agreed for their safety, which is promised essentially by the king. Ultimately, the king can't provide as much safety as he promises or promised. Therefore, the king creates God essentially as a scapegoat for something bad that's happening. And now that explanation becomes, hey, I'm the king. I really don't understand and I don't have full control. This is being done by someone else, and that's where the responsibility is. But now, without someone to form to, God has to now be recreated as not understandable. Otherwise, I have to justify, the king has to justify why God is doing this kind of stuff. So we have the whole thing progressing as a reason for maintaining civilization, which essentially is being maintained for the good of the king.
And that's definitely part of it. And I definitely, that's one of the ways they created society. And I agree. I don't think what you're saying works against what I said, because for safety is important, but you have to feel safe within the city as well. I mean, we're going to attack you, join us. But when you come to our city, kings want stability. I mean, even in the Dark Ages, when people were attacking Jews and attacking Muslims and gypsies, which are called, Romana today, who was the person who generally wanted it stopped? It was generally the king or the duke, because you do not like instability in your own. You don't like people killing each other unless you're in charge of it, unless you're in control. So yeah, I agree with you completely. But again, the laws of Hammurabi come a little bit later, and they're basically laws of how to live in the city and what are the laws for this kingdom. But yeah, I agree.
Incidentally,
So when you,
I was just going to say, I didn't mean to imply at all
oh,
that
sorry,
that's
Jeff.
my belief.
No, I agree with you. I think that's basically one of the things that they required. That's absolutely. David, did you have something you want to say?
Oh, no, no.
Okay, so this is the Bible, but let's look at some of the individual books and we can continue. I mean, we're just looking at some. So when you look at the individual books, some of them that stick out, of course, are Esther, which we could do a whole class on. Esther and Ruth are interesting books for many ways. One, of course, is that they are books about women.
Okay.
And that is rare because there's only two books about with women in the title. And both of them are unique. Esther is, as I said, a great farce. We talked about that, where you have a frivolous king who is partying all year long, has a beauty pageant to find a wife that lasts over a year, is really gives way too much power to a henchman who hates Mordecai and tries to kill the Jews, and then the king finds out and then eventually acquiesces, and then the Jews are allowed to defend themselves, and then they go to the king and say, we need another day to defend ourselves, and they go out and go to war again. Ruth is a story that is really centered on women. It's the only book that is completely centered on women, and we've talked about it, but it's about a woman and showing dedication. It's about a woman who decides to follow her mother-in-law, even though her husband is deceased, into the netherworld of her mother-in-law's past life without any guarantees, and how she behaves and eventually is able to marry a respectable man. And then, of course, her descendants will be King David. it's really sometimes interesting to see how these books made it in. The rabbis probably put this together, the Bible, somewhere around the 90 CE, after the destruction of the Second Temple. They had a lot of different books. We know from the Dead Sea Scrolls. A lot of them are available. Some of the books, like the two Maccabee books, were purposefully not put in the Bible. They're put in another section called Apocrypha. So they had to decide what books, what order, and what books to leave out. And so a couple of the books that you wonder most about is Esther. They put in a book that is about a princess who becomes a queen, and then Ruth, which is based upon the lives of two women. Something's going on. Excuse me, guys. Back 1 second. Sorry about that. It sounded like an earthquake again. It may have been the ice coming off our roof.
Oh,
Because the whole house shook a second time. That one was a lot worse. So hopefully there's no damage. April's checking. So another book that was really strange that got in was Song of Songs. This is a romantic book. It's almost lurid sometimes. It's about the love between God and us, but it uses a man and a woman as an example, and it can be very steamy at times. So how did that book get in is a big question. Lamentations is a really interesting complement to the book of Jeremiah. Okay. For Tisha B'Av, the day of mourning, Lamentations is a mourning. It's mourning the destruction of the temple, the first temple, from the point of view of Jerusalem. So it's Jerusalem who has been made into almost a human, talking about how the people have left her, how she's in ruins, and how the world is ending in some ways for her. And like Jeremiah, blaming it on the people who have stopped believing. So those are kind of all the books, and we'll go into some more specifics in a bit. Are there any questions as we go on? Okay, so let's go into interesting aspects of different books. One of my favorite books is Jonah, which I don't know if we've talked about. Everybody knows the story about Jonah and the whale. Next week, we'll talk a little bit more about some of the more obscure ones. Jonah and the whale is an essential story for Judaism. In many ways, beyond what the book is. It's become famous, obviously, because he goes in the whale. It's like a Pinocchio story. It's a very interesting story, but it is a dramatic story that harkens back to Genesis. So Jonah is a prophet. We don't know how prophets are chosen. We don't know why. Some are wealthy, some are poor, some are learned, some are not. Some live in the north, some live in the south, some are younger, some are older. Most are men. There's a couple of women. Jonah is chosen to be a prophet. Does everybody remember the story? And he's told to go to Nineveh and to tell the people to repent. That is the weirdest sound. Ice coming off the roof. That is, I hope it's not damaging. It really sounds scary. So Nineveh, which is really just probably an E here, he's asked to go to Nineveh and preach and tell everybody to behave. But he doesn't do it. He runs away. He hides on a ship of sailors. And when the waves start crashing into the boat and the boat's about to sink, and they say, let's every man on deck batten down the hatches, pray to your God or gods. And Jonah doesn't do anything. He's just ready to die. And they ask him, why aren't you helping? He says, it's my God who's upset at me. And instead of throwing him overboard, the sailors, who are supposed to be the worst of the worst, try and save him. They risk their lives to save Jonah, even though I don't know him, until he agrees, I'm just going to jump overboard. So the sailors turn out to be really good people. And then he goes to Nineveh and preaches, you're misbehaving. Do the sackcloth and ash thing and repent. And what does happen? What do the people of Nineveh do? Often when the prophets preach to the Jewish community, they ignore the prophets. Now he's going to these other people and they say, you know what? You're right. We are misbehaving. We're going to put on sackcloth and have ashes, and we're going to start behaving better. And they do, and they repent. And these are somebody else. It's not the Jewish community. And then Jonah sits down and he gets very upset, and then God puts the plant, and he gets upset about the plant. But what this book does not tell you is the background information. And what is the background information? The people of Nineveh are the enemy of the Israelites. It's a powerful country that's going to come and destroy them eventually. These are the bad guys in the eyes of us. And so Jonah, the prophet, is made to look bad, where the sailors are made to look heroic, and the bad guys, the people of Nineveh, are made to look like the good guys. And so the story is about how God created all humanity, and all human beings have the opportunity to repent, and that all human beings have the opportunity to be good human beings, and that stereotypes can be very wrong. And sometimes we forget this because the story of the whale is so much more exciting and interesting. So we concentrate on the whale, especially with teaching kids, when the actual story is very profound. It is one of the ideas that makes the Bible so different from books of the other ancient time, and that the Bible criticizes the Israelites more than anybody else. That's a critique of the Israelites' difficulties in being ethical monotheists. That's what the whole Bible is. And it comes to head in Jonah in more ways than one than in most of the other ones. So it's real when we read it on Yom Kippur. Sometimes, it's in the afternoon and the smaller crowds, but that's really, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to talk about it this year for Yom Kippur. Thank you. It's a great idea, Lou. Thanks for mentioning it. Perfect. Now, as we look at this, are there any particular books or any subjects concerned with the Bible that you'd like me to talk about? Flossie had an idea she wanted me to talk about, which I have forgotten, but I put it down, so we may do that next week. Flossie, do you remember what it was? I wrote it down, but otherwise, let's see here. I'll see if I can get her
It's
to. Flossie,
not
what was it?
coming through. I'm trying to speak Lilith.
Lilith. Well, so next week we'll talk about Lilith. Thank you. I forgot about that.
That's
But we
okay.
can talk about other things if you want. So
Rabbi,
any questions? Yes.
can I ask a question? I tried
Sure,
before
please.
and I tapped, it didn't go through. When we go back as far as your comment, being rewarded, and it was basically after death, if you could say beyond, was that the first time Jews thought about being rewarded after, not in this life, in the next, you want to say life, or
No, I think Joe brings up the question. Some of this afterlife stuff is touched on barely in places like Isaiah, and maybe I think a little bit of Psalms, but the afterlife is really not a prime target of the Bible. Our Bible is so much older than the idea of the afterlife being a reward. So really the highlight, or when the afterlife became a reward, really you're talking as late as the 1st century BCE, 1st century CE, where this idea becomes really prominent. In ancient society, you died and you went underground to Gehenna or wherever your people went, and you kind of lived there on the other side of the river. I mean, eternal life was not something we invented either, although it's certainly part of Genesis. But it's not till really post-biblical times that we really start to get into the nitty-gritty of the next world. It is mentioned at times in the Bible, as I mentioned. Christianity looks at Isaiah and a couple other places as really emphasizing the next world. It's kind of their way of looking at it, not right or wrong, just different than ours. The reason possibly that Christianity and Judaism differ not on the next world as much, but how much we talk about it is because of this. In Christianity, they talk about the next world all the time. I mean, it's really prominent in their theology and sermons and eulogies. You hear about it, heaven, heaven, heaven all the time. In Judaism, we do talk about it, but it's not as prominent by any stretch. Why is it more prominent in Christianity? Because of when Christianity is formed. Christianity is formed in the 1st century CE when this apocalyptic idea, this messianic idea, this next world reward idea is really coming in and people are talking about it all the time. So it's at the core of Christianity, whereas for Judaism, we've been around 1,300 years before we started really talking about it. So it's, again, a good analogy I use all the time. It's like learning to read when you're 60 versus learning to read when you're a little kid. If you start learning to read at 5, 6, or 7, you're going to be a better reader than if you learn to read at 60 or 40. It's like learning a new language. A little kid can learn a new language a lot faster.
thank you.
So, good question. Now, one of the other things we'd like to talk about is, it's not here, but the Kings right here, the end of Kings is the destruction of the first temple by the Babylonians, who take the leadership into Babylon, and the last king disappears. However, later, is it in, oh my goodness, it's not Malachi, I think it's Haggai. Haggai is Zechariah. One second. My goodness, I just forgot. All right, 1 second. All right, so okay, Haggai, it's Haggai. So in Haggai right here, but then also in Chronicles, and I think maybe Ezra, they mention the last descendant of David. Zerubbabel. You want a cool name to remember? Zerubbabel. So he comes in Haggai, he disappears, he's probably murdered or and this is the last descendant of David. So the Messiah is supposed to go through David. This is the last person we hear about who is a descendant of David. So he disappears in Haggai, he's mentioned in Chronicles and I think Ezra as well. So this guy possibly will be where the Messiah comes from. It could be another descendant of David we don't know about. Now, what's interesting is, as we talked about before, tribal Judaism ends probably somewhere around the 8th century, maybe then going into the 7th century BCE. So the tribes end. So nobody knows what tribe they're from who's Jewish. If you're Jewish going back to the 7th century BCE, you're not going to know what tribe you are because the northern tribes got destroyed and all the tribes came together, except if you're a Levite. That's the only tribe. And again, as I mentioned, you only know if you're a Levite if your daddy tells you. So what this means is we don't know where the Messiah is coming from. It can come from anybody who was Jewish going back then. It could be Ron, it could be David. They do say it's a man. Could it be me? Possibly, but if I'm a Levite, then at least one side of me is a priestly clan, so it couldn't come from me, but who knows? We only know that the Messiah will one day come. In Christianity, they have a listing that goes from Zerubbabel all the way down to the time of Jesus. I don't know where they get that from. We don't have it. So the whole Bible is so interesting in so many ways, and we can go in so many different directions. David, do you have a question?
No.
All right, so we'll end with this. Next week, we're going to talk about Lilith. And then I think the week after, we'll start talking about some individual books. We can easily do an hour or more on all of them. Does anybody have a book they prefer to study next? If not, no worries. I'll just pick random ones.
When you say books, Rabbi, you mean books of the Bible?
Right. I think that's what we're going to do a little bit of. We're going to talk about Lilith next week, and we'll talk about how Lilith is in the Bible or maybe not in the Bible. All right. I think everybody's thinking the excitement is outside.
No, not really.
Stuart.
I think, I don't know where it fits in your thinking for the course in general. But there's a sort of another whole layer that goes on here that's not necessarily specifically in books, but I think establishes the nature of Judaism pretty clearly. For example, the word choose appears far more frequently in Deuteronomy, in Torah in general, and in Torah in general, and in Deuteronomy in specific, than it does in all of the Old Testament. And indeed, Deuteronomy, the word choose appears much more frequently than it does in all of the New Testament, the Christian part of the Bible. And it seems to me that that establishes very much the nature of Judaism, because in Judaism, that's where we argue. That's where Israel wrestled with God. Same argument. So I guess I'm questioning how many other sort of these, looking at Peshat, not looking at the very literal stuff only in the first part of interpretation, but going a little deeper into messages that we pull out without looking at the literal stories.
We can do that. We can talk about the meanings. Absolutely, if you want to do that. We can look at the book of Deuteronomy, Bachar Chaim, choose Bachar B'chaim, choose life. Or Bacheret B'chaim if you're, so.
I don't know,
I think-
I'm just bringing that
I
up.
think that's a great idea. We can look at
Cool.
the meanings, or, we can do a little bit of everything. I think it's great. So we'll do Lilith next week. Do you want to do Deuteronomy and maybe the week after?
Okay.
All right. I'll end with this. I'm sorry, Flossie.
A question. Who was Joshua? I know he took over after Moses, and you said Aaron might not have existed. I thought Aaron was in progression. Who is Joshua?
Joshua is the person who takes over for Moses when Moses dies.
But who was it?
He's a guy who, so from Deuteronomy, so Moses is going to die, so he names his successor, or God names the successor Joshua. So Joshua is famous because he was a representative of his tribe that was one of the 12 spies. So remember the 12 spies that go in?
Yes. Mhm.
Numbers 2. So the 12 spies go in, and 2 of them, 10 come back and say, we can't go in the land of Israel. It is, the people are giants. We're going to all die. And 2 of the spies, Joshua and Caleb, say, no, we got God on our side. Of course we can do this. And so all of the generation of slaves who came out of Egypt have to die before we go into the land of Israel, except for 2. The only 2 people who, possibly the kids were able to, if they were little coming out, but the only 2 people who grew up as slaves who get to go into the land of Israel are Joshua and Caleb, and Joshua's made the leader. He is also from the tribe of Ephraim, which will become one of the 2 major tribes, the Judah in the south and Ephraim in the north. So he is also very prominent from the group he comes from the tribe.
Okay. Thank you.
My pleasure. So Joshua's basically a warrior. He's chosen for, he's the entire book of Joshua is basically, attempts to settle this land, and they fight the Canaanites. And it's really, the most famous is the very beginning of Joshua, which is the walls of Jericho falling.
Oh, okay. I forgot that. Yeah.
So he's the one who leads them into the land. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Good question. So next week we're going to do Lilith and find out that she is mentioned in the Bible, sort of, but not in the way that she comes to be taught about later. So think about that. She is mentioned sort of in the Bible, but really is not. So with that, I'm going to go over the final one story. So we're at the park and we're sledding. People are bringing floaties out and we're sledding. And, because my kids have never seen snow, and my son accidentally goes the wrong way over like these dangerous brick steps and lands and almost hurts himself.
Oh,
Yeah. So what do you do? So what happens when a kid does that? What does he do next? He does it again, but this time going face forward, and makes it more dangerous. So instead of just saying, no, I'm not going to, he lands, he's like, wow, I wasn't hurt. Amazing. Let me try that and see if I can make it more dangerous. Yes.
Did you take a picture, Rabbi?
We took a lot of pictures. Oh, my daughter was so precious. My daughter went down the hill, like she was the first one to go down the hill on the floaty, and she ran into a bench. And she said, I want a video. So she went up and did it again so I could take a video of her, and I didn't press the button.
Oh,
Oh, no.
no.
So-
So she's crying, saying, I don't want to do this. I'm like, you don't have to do it. She's like, I want a video. So she climbs it again. It does it a third time. This time I catch her. She's coming down. We get the video and then we came home.
So we can look for it on
So-
Facebook.
Yeah. We'll see. Hopefully they
Oh.
came out. But she was so
Okay.
brave. She went down
Oh, good.
3 times and did not enjoy any of them.
I have a technical question.
Oh, no.
How many
Yes.
times did you go down, Rabbi?
I did not go down because I wanted to go down, but I had to stay down there because my wife had gone up, so we had tag teaming.
Uh,
Technical question. Where does one find a sled in Savannah?
Well, what people did was they took those donut floaties.
Oh, okay.
Some people took their boogie boards. We took the tops of some of our containers, which all broke, and so now we have no tops for all these containers.
Okay.
And you can't buy them because if you go to the store, you buy the container with the top. So if we buy that, we're still going to have these containers that have no tops. It's kind of like we didn't think about that. They all broke.
Don't
And
worry,
then- but
Rabbi,
then people-
you had the tops.
Thank you. But I think some people were smart and they got like one of them we saw they left it out there. It said snow something. It was like a pool thing, but it said snow thing. I think people bought his stuff on Amazon in anticipation.
that makes sense. That's true. You can buy anything on Amazon, right?
Yeah, will it get here in time? Who knows? But you guys stay safe. It looks like it's all melting. So go away. You have a little bit longer to go do a snowball fight.
Yeah.
Thanks, Rabbi.
Stay
Thank
safe,
you,
everybody.
Rabbi.
You safe, everybody.
Bye. Everybody have a good day.
Guys.
Bye.
Be
Bye.
be careful out there.
Bye-bye.